name's Charlotte Harding. I'm Director of Professional Development for NGA. I'm quite new to this role actually, although being with NGA for some years. I've headed up the NLG programme and previously to that led on the DFE contract for leading governance. So I've been in the organisation for some time. My aim today is very much to wrap this up in enough time to allow for plenty of questions and interaction at the time. And as Emma said, please do use the questions function on the webinar. But today I've been invited to talk to you about budget setting, and I very much appreciate what a challenge this is. It is a really good idea for us to sort of start to get an idea of who's in the room. So I'm really keen to get an idea of you and who you are and the type of settings that you're governing in at the moment. So I am just about to start a poll, and if you will be able to sort of see those questions and answer them. If you can, it is multiple choice. I know some of you may well be governing in more than one setting, or even leading a school or trust, so it'd be great to see that. I would say that everything that I'm going to talk to you about today fits all types of settings, whether it is a maintained nursery school or a large MAT that covers all phases of education. It's also very much scalable. So whether you sit on a finance committee or a trust board, all of the information that we'll be talking about today, I'm very much hoping that you will be able to bring something back to your own sector. So hopefully you can see those results. Thank you very much for taking part. I can see that there's a majority of maintained schools, but a really good representation from our academy sector as well. So thank you very much. So I wanted to start off by sharing some information with you, so you are very aware that you are not alone with the challenges that you have at the moment. So NGA runs an annual governance survey for all of our members, and we've been doing that for the last 13 years. So we've got some excellent data about the pressures and challenges that you all do face. We use this information to share with policymakers, and we work very closely and influence as much as we possibly can when it comes to the DFE and other stakeholders in governance. You may well actually have seen quite a lot of press recently, both in the education sector and the mainstream media, quoting quite a lot from NGA's survey this year, particularly around finance challenges, and also very much on sort of safeguarding concerns and the increase in behaviour issues. But a little context for this slide rather. 76% of NGA members responded this year, and without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest challenge is balancing the budget. 52% of our members expressed this as their biggest concern, sorry, my screen's gone a bit crazy. 52% of our respondents reported that balancing their budget in the current circumstances was their biggest challenge. SEND funding, as we know, is a real challenge as well, and accessing that information is extremely difficult for a lot of schools and trusts. Energy prices continue to be a big factor and concern for setting budgets, and actually, although that seems to have gone a little bit off the boil in the media, it very much impacts all of our budgets last year, this year, and continues to go 2024 and beyond. So whilst we've talked a little bit then about sort of short-term and immediate challenges, what we have here is a real interesting representation about the medium and long-term financial challenges that schools and trusts face. So you can see here that there's been a particularly marked increase in those that cite financial long-term sustainability being a particular issue. So only a fifth of the schools and trusts reported that they were financially stable with the current levels of funding. So that's a 10% decrease from last year. And those governing within trusts actually were far more likely to report that their medium term and long term position was slightly more positive compared to those governing in a maintained board. And I think, you know, a lot of what we're talking about today about collaboration and working together is where trusts do benefit, but there are lots that the maintained sector can do to, I think, sort of replicate a little bit of how those financial savings can work. The area on the right hand side about the fact that the unsustainability without significant change is a particularly interesting one, and a huge actually increase from last year's data. Now, I would like to see how much of this resonates with you in your particular role. So what I am going to do is just do a little poll as well, just to get an idea from you as to how much this sits with your particular setting at the moment. So this is a multiple choice. So I'm going to oh, apologies, I don't think my oh, you might be able to see that poll. I am hoping that you can, but I don't know.
Charlotte, it's not coming. Oh, it has come up now, Charlotte. Yes.
No, I think there's I think I've got a problem with that one, so you can bear with me, but perhaps this is something that we could pick up in the questions and answers at the end about not just the current short-term challenges, but that medium to long-term financial position and how you feel your settings are sustainable. So where are we now in 2023? We are all aware, I think, by now of the decline in real-time funding over a long period of time, which really has been down, as we know, to huge underfunding of the school system by consecutive governments. What else, though, has contributed to this, what a lot of people sort of refer to this perfect storm of financial challenge? Well, we've talked a little bit about energy costs, and actually, as I said, although it's sort of gone off the boil, it's still very much part of the biggest spend that a lot of settings have. I listened to a presentation by a trust the other day, actually, that talked about environmental sustainability, and they're doing huge amounts to reduce energy costs because it is, without a doubt, their biggest single expenditure. The cost of living crisis continues, doesn't it? And actually, this affects absolutely everything in schools, from supplies to services to food. Every aspect of purchasing, I feel, is affected by this. And it's something that we're going to have to live with for a long time. But actually, this increased burden on schools to support in the community, the increase that I'm sure you'll all be very aware of about safeguarding concerns, increase in behaviour issues, all the financial burdens that our families actually have to experience. Schools are often the centre of the support, aren't they? The real piece of continuity in a lot of children's lives, and that all has a knock-on effect on our bottom line. So what's our biggest challenge? And I think this absolutely sums it up. We are, without a shadow of a doubt, in this game to improve the outcomes for children and young people. But not just academically. We want our children supported in school, don't we, to become the very best versions of themselves. And it's the heart of everything that we do in governance, isn't it? It should go without saying that boards shouldn't set visions and strategies that are not financially achievable. However, it's an extremely difficult thing to balance, I know that. If the usual funding streams won't support the vision and strategy that you want to set, then it really is down to us and the board to ensure that the school or trust has a really sensible strategy to find that shortfall or to reduce expenditure. And of course, to then go on to monitor the implementation of that strategy. So I don't want to spend too long on lamenting our position. We are where we are, aren't we? Nothing's going to particularly change for the very short term. So we really need to be practical and really positive and explore how we can work with the resources that we have. We'll spend some time now looking at people, both staff and those that are governed, how honest we are when we look at our financial position and how we monitor and consider risk. We'll spend a little bit of time looking at generating income and reducing expenditure. And I will finish on a few words on the importance of integrated curriculum financial planning. So I'm going to start off with some really important questions that you can ask yourself as a board. One of the descriptors of this session actually was about an audit tool, and this is a great place to start. So your audit tool in theory should really be the Academy's Trust Handbook for those that govern in trusts, and its particular section on governance and finance, and of course for our maintained colleagues, your SFVS, which you will need to complete and submit to your local authority annually. These, though, are some really important questions that will fit alongside that and start the conversation off for your board. So, do we have the right skills as governors or trustees to understand and analyse and ultimately ask the right questions about the budget? And if not, what are we doing about it? Do we need to recruit those with the skills? We often talk about the importance of robust induction, don't we, and training for new governors and trustees. But do you take advantage of the training that's available? We'll come on to that in a little while. And actually, it doesn't have to be through external agencies or your local authority. You will have, if your school business professional Bursa CFO is experienced, and if they have the skills to do that job, do you take advantage of that and spend time with them, really understanding the funding that your school gets, the management accounts and cash flow for those governing at trust board, and all of those quite complicated income and expenditure nominal codes that you'll be presented with regularly when you look at your budget in a maintained school. Actually, are you really confident that your school business manager, CFO, or whichever SLA that you might buy into for finance assistance, is it effective? Are they qualified and experienced? Is their performance management effective and robust? All of these things we'll touch on in a little while, and particularly around benchmarking. So we talked very quickly then, didn't we? We mentioned about training and induction, and actually there are lots of very specific training available to support you in your role. It's often cited as one of the aspects of governance that people feel less knowledgeable about. So really ensure that your school or trust is supporting you in getting that knowledge, and make sure you've got a little bit of money for allocating to your CPD. This is just a little example of some training and guidance that NGA produces, but there's lots of other organisations that you can access. Governors for Schools, which is why we're here today, have lots of advice and guidance on this type of work. So really take advantage of what's available. Your local authority as well may well be able to provide training for those governing in maintained schools, and they will have lots of resources available to you. And all of this is available through different methods of delivery, and there is something out there to suit all budgets. There's also plenty of advice and guidance out there for you to access. Two examples here of the type that we produce from NGA, but again, lots of other avenues for you to explore and information that's out there. So these two pieces of advice and guidance sit very much hand in hand with what we've just talked about with the Academy's Trust Handbook and the School's Financial Value Standard, your SVS, to support the knowledge that you need to do your job well. So we mentioned benchmarking. This website, which is DFE managed, allows schools and trusts to compare their setting against others. So this is often criticised. I really appreciate that for being historical data. And it is true, actually, that it usually represents the previous academic year or even the one prior to that, particularly around the sort of financials that are presented. But what it is a benchmark. You know, it's not 100% accurate and up to date, but it can be an extremely useful tool for you to start. So I would really encourage you to start using this as individuals and also collectively to compare your schools, maybe across the whole trust if you govern at a MAT, or across other schools in your immediate area. You can choose those with similar characteristics or those within a particular geographical area. All of those things you can ask this website to do, and it's a great starting place. I would also say that there is, of course, context around all of the data that you'll see on this website. And there may be a really good reason why your spend is considerably higher than the school down the road. But what this does is start the conversation and allows you rather to ask questions about why. It's very important and can create some really healthy debate. That awareness of how and where you spend your money compared to others can bring a real richness to your conversation. So for those of you that haven't accessed this website before, I've grabbed a couple of screenshots here to give you an idea of what type of information it analyses. So as you can see here, I just put a school name in and it will provide you with all of the public information about overall spending and reserves. It will show you overall costs. It will give you income and expenditure, and it also allows you to break this down further by all of those subheadings. So you can look at teaching staff, you can look at support staff, energy spend, facilities, and everything in between. And as I said, it is by no means a panacea. It is historical, but it is a great way to start looking, why are we spending so much more? Or why is X spending less than we are? So our next slide and topic is about the information that you receive. We need to be really honest about where we are. So here are some further considerations for your board. Are you cautious in your budget setting or optimistic? Both can mean further challenges, actually. We do need to be honest about our current financial situation, because how can we ensure that our spend and budgeting is effective if we're not starting from a true place? We're already setting ourselves up for a fall if it's not as accurate as it possibly can. So do you, as a board, give yourself enough time to discuss finances? So this might be through your structure. It might be finance committees. It might be about timing agendas to ensure that there is proper time allocated to discussion. So it's not just about receiving information, it's about having it in enough time to analyze it and to look at it yourself. Do you actually even receive the information in a format that you understand, not just how your finance staff want to present it? So that might be a really good starting point in a conversation. Do I know what this means? Do I need to ask for it in a different format? Do we act quickly if we need to? So some long-term or some financial planning absolutely should be long-term, and we're not suggesting knee-jerk reactions, but sometimes decisions and changes have to be made quickly. Do we wait for the next finance meeting, or are there processes in place which means that we can work between those events? Are we encouraged to have courageous conversations? So not just asking challenging questions, but it's about what happens after that question's answered. Do we sit there accepting it, or are we brave enough? Do we probe further? Do you have the kind of culture that allows and encourages that type of debate? Organisation, absolutely the key for financial management. And you need to make sure that you're looking at the right things at the right time, in enough time to make sure that you can affect that change. And this is where your governance professional or clerk can really support you. If you're working with your governance professional, if they're working with your chair to structure agendas, make sure the timings of your meetings are in the right point in the academic year, and all of that planning in advance will pay dividends. I've included here just a screenshot of some guidance that NGA produces, but this information is very much publicly available through your local authority. And whilst we also produce guidance for trusts, the ESFA produce an absolutely great planning calendar for trusts. The maintained one is very much termly, but ESFA plan monthly. And this is designed to make sure that everybody in the academy sector are fulfilling their financial responsibilities. So this document actually is written for SLT and finance staff, but for a trustee, and I know this was very helpful when I started governing in the trust sector, it's invaluable to see what your trust's doing and when. So I'm making sure that I'm asking the right questions at the right time. So a few words on risk, something we all have to live with. Often it's about identifying and mitigating against risk rather than removing it together. It's an absolutely fundamental element of, well, good governance altogether, really. But financial management, this is a really important document. So do you have a strong risk register? Does it bring together all the aspects of school or trust life in one place? It is mandatory for trusts to have, but maintained schools are advised that they should do so and bring that type of all of the aspects of school life together in one document. It can be a very useful tool to oversee things. And really effective risk registers, as I said, bring together that sort of operational, compliance, governance, all of the areas of organisational management. And of course, finance underpins everything. So working closely with this risk register can be hugely beneficial. So a little bit more about the important things about the money coming in. This is never easy. And it is actually not written that boards have any responsibility for income generation, but we talk a lot about challenge, don't we? But actually our roles are very much here to support our schools and trusts. So whilst we may not be out there with a collection box, we can really help our leaders to ensure that all ideas for income and revenue generation are explored. Some schools really shy away from this, and it's quite difficult for a lot of us to come to the realization that we need to be out there banging our own drums. We do need to worry about the bottom line at the end of the day. And we don't want to be in that position where we're sort of turning education into a business, but we can't afford to not be aware of this. And actually, if we think about the first few slides of the workshop and the challenges that we all face, we really need to be more proactive as a sector about bringing in additional income where we can. And actually, let's have a look at these. Look at these separate areas here. We can, of course, look at income admissions and increasing those. It's probably the easiest way because it's secure and continual income. So do we have an attractive offer? Do we promote our school? Do we have the space and capacity to support more children? Do we have a site that can be used outside of school hours? And actually, this might need a little bit of investment, which must sound counterintuitive, but it doesn't always have to be expensive or incur huge expense. Can we rent out our space? Are there local businesses that can support and work with us? Sometimes it's about saving money by others providing resources or time rather than cash into the coffers. And yes, be sensible with staffing. Are we looking at our structure regularly? Does it serve our needs? Do we need a highly experienced teacher in area A, or do we have the opportunity to train an ECT? Do you make the most of your expertise? Can this be marketed to other schools? And I would absolutely finish this slide by acknowledging that none of this is easy. And actually, it is not all available or even viable for all schools, but I would at least encourage you to ask the questions of your leaders. We have an enormous amount of skills and professional expertise as governors and trustees. Can we be of use? Can we help going out into the community and supporting and investigating how we can generate more revenue? And a few words on accessing grants. Now, this can be an absolute minefield, but these resources here, which you will have after the session, are massively helpful. They don't all need either huge amounts of time to write really complex bids, which is where capacity is an issue, always a concern. And actually, you don't always have to think about grants as thousands of pounds. There is money out there in lots of different places, but finding it is really difficult. A school, actually, we saw the other day at our MAC conference earlier on in the week, talked about some funding that they had through their local water board, of all places. I think they were after some good press after all the dumping of the sewage in the local rivers. But they ended up paying and providing huge outdoor planters for their schoolyard. So, you know, able to support a really enriched outdoor curriculum for them. And that's something that they, as a school, would never have been able to afford if it wasn't for that little pot of money. And actually, your local authority, whether you're a maintained school or a trust, can be a really helpful and useful place. Lots of organisations and people who have these pots of money will go to your local authority and ask for that information to be disseminated across the geographical area. So make contact with them, make sure you're on their mailers, make sure that you're on their information that they send out about that. But it does take time. Local businesses might be a really great starting point for you. It might be that you want to ask your school business manager to access these websites. Lots of organisations have charitable objectives as part of their community promises. So again, ask the questions. Please have a look. That is out there if you can find the time and have the capacity to look. So whilst we talk about income generation, we also need to go hand in hand with reducing expenditure. Energy, one of our biggest spends currently. Does your school or trust have an energy efficiency policy? What can be done for more sustainability and obviously therefore reducing cost? I did start this second point down actually, and it originally said go paperless. And I thought, what a crazy thing to say for our schools. Our children need resources, but there are better ways to go paperless for your internal communications. I've sat at board meetings where there are reams and reams and reams of paper, and it's a very expensive resource. Can we use technology better? Again, I appreciate some investment might be required. Do you look at what services you spend your money on and whether it can be done in-house? And actually the opposite as well. Are you paying staff to carry out work that an outsourced SLA might be cheaper and more effective? And actually look at your SLAs. Do they really provide value for money? And actually, it's not just they're the cheapest, but do they actually provide you with what you need that year? Can you investigate ways of working with other settings? Much easier in trusts, I appreciate it, where financial savings can be made across all schools. But even here, trusts can work better together. And as a single school, can you talk to schools in the local area? Can you look at joint procurement and drive down costs? Staffing's always difficult, I know, and an extremely emotive subject. Reduction of staffing can sometimes be impossible. So my ask here is about reviewing it regularly. And actually, it's not about always removing posts. It's the deployment of staff across the school or trust. Is it being done in the most effective way? And a couple of points on integrated curriculum financial planning. Now, ICFP is not actually something particularly new, although it has been seen as a bit of a trend recently. Most of you are probably already doing this in some way, shape, or form. Although, as I said, lots of limelight on track and sort of traction around this idea recently. So you might have heard ICFP, you might have been or heard it being referred to as optimization. But really, what this is a management process that is designed to stimulate informed discussion between finance and curriculum. So it gives each side of that coin, if you like, a real understanding of where the pressures are, what the financial challenges are, or any sort of deviance from expenditure and benchmarking. So this directly goes back to one of the first slides where we looked at our scales, where we said how difficult it was to balance vision and strategy with the budget that's available. And ICFP is designed to allow you to balance that. Those days of the curriculum committee and the finance committee sitting in different rooms and only reporting by sharing the minutes at the full governors or trust board meeting are well and truly over. We must really ensure that we look at our schools holistically and consider all of the financial situations when we set out our intention for our children and young people. So thank you very much for your time. I hope it's been interesting and that there will be at least something that you can take back to your schools and trusts to consider. I know the recording and the slides I think will be shared as well. So I've brought some of those resources together for you to directly look at. But really, if there's anything else that either through Governors for Schools or NGA can do to support you in your role, my contact details are there, and please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was really insightful, and particularly took away for me the importance of that partnering with a governance professional to ensure regular scheduling and the calendar of activities to make sure that we never miss a trick in the year. And I think regular questioning about income generation as a board is really important, not necessarily the doing of it, as you said, but making sure that's a question that's always being asked and discussed, and it's not something that just comes up as an ad hoc thought as well is really important, because let's face it, as we all know as governors, what gets measured gets done.
Absolutely.
Asking that question can be the tool to a phenomenal discussion. So I'm really grateful that we've got some questions from our audience, and I'd love to encourage anybody else to comment or ask questions as well. And I'll just take it from the top, to be honest. So Ralph has asked or said it would be helpful to receive advice or comments on how best to arrive at a figure or how much to set aside as a reserve in a school's budget.
Wow, there's a question. Okay. So I would say that any reserve at the moment, you should be very pleased about having, particularly when we look at in-year balancing. And I have to say, there isn't one answer, unfortunately, because it very much depends on whether you're a maintained school or whether you're a trust, whether you're looking at one school or many schools. You know, you might be in a federation. So I don't know whether I've got an absolute answer for that. But what I would encourage you to do is work with your senior leaders about a financial policy. So in the ideal situation, trusts and schools rather would have a financial policy which will include a percentage that you could aim for your reserves. And that is a really important document. Actually, Emma, exactly as you've just said, what's measured is done. So if it's written, and if you're holding your leaders to account for it, and if you're using that ideal percentage of income, in your policy, that is a great way to hold them to account. Just to sort of expand on that slightly, you know, as a trust, you are in theory not allowed to set a deficit budget. You may well be able to negotiate one for a maintained school with your local authority, but the LA and for trusts, the ESFA are very much there to support you as well. So if you're looking for more specific advice on that, those people are available.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Charlotte. I'm just wondering, I'm sure we've got out of the many people on the call, the governors who perhaps do have percentages that they think about reserving. And I know it's really bespoke for each school, but if anybody would like to add into the chat any thoughts, please do share your wisdom collectively. So just move on to the next question. Really great one from Bruce. What happens to the SFES? We submit ours each year, he says, to the LA, but never have any feedback.
Oh, wow. So the local authority use that as an audit tool, I suppose, for want of a better word, to assure themselves that you have the skills that you need to carry out that third responsibility of making sure that those public funds are being spent and monitored. And also that you're following the regulations about procurement. So I would say in one way, if they're not coming back to you, then that's good. And it means that you've ticked their boxes and actually they don't have any cause for concern. They may well share it with the internal audit people at the local authority. And when it's time for your school to have that type of audit, that SFES will go into that pot of information and may well go towards some outcome and decision making around sort of RAG rating your financial sustainability. SFES is used massively differently across the country. So some it's very much tick box. The head teacher fills it out, bang, 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 and it's sent off and never discussed again. But if you use it, maybe as one of your discussions or agenda items, your finance committee, and really read and understand what's there, that document in itself can really go towards making sure that you are financially healthy.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. So Sue has said, and I'm sure many schools are potentially in this situation or at risk of it. We always complete skills audit. We're in the maintained sector. An excellent finance manager and several very experienced governors with high level roles in industry, but having a thorough knowledge of understanding of all the tools doesn't prevent us from our income being badly affected for the first time in 15 years, driven by local authority decisions. So now they're facing a licence deficit and needing to get out of it. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how a board addresses that situation.
So I think you've got two things there, haven't you? You mentioned about your skills audit and that you feel that you've probably sort of followed everything that you could have, but you are where you are. And obviously it sounds like a very difficult situation. I mentioned at the beginning actually about our annual governance survey and maintained governance report that balancing that budget is there was a higher percentage of maintained governors that find that impossible than those that govern in trusts. So you're obviously working with your local authority, which is absolutely the right thing to do, and I'm sure they're advising you on it. When it comes to skills, and I'm not saying for any stretch that this is the situation that you're in, but a skills audit is great. But again, the same way I just mentioned about the SFES, often people complete it, it goes in a folder, it's filed electronically. We've done that for this year and that's fine. But actually it's about analysing, working with those gaps. And actually it might not be a 0 for your skills for finances, it might be a 2, but that could still be a 4. So what sort of training needs analysis are you doing around that to support that further? And it's how you use that documentation. So I think I'd say that may well be something that you could consider in the future. License deficits are extremely difficult. I know that. I've worked for the local authority myself before, and it is a real challenge. You will, I'm sure, be asked about staffing structures. You will be asked about reducing your expenditure, and hopefully what your LA will be able to do is support you over the long term. I'm hoping that nobody's going to expect you to fix this by the end of this financial year, for instance, or even probably by the end of this academic year. It's that long-term structure, but looking at why that issue happened in the first place and what caused that deficit, that is the biggest learn. And comparing your budgets to previous years, was this something that we could have predicted looking at 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, or is it something that has come out of the blue for whatever reason?
That's such a great point, Charlotte. And I think that hand-in-hand working with the local authority is so important. It's not something that's sort of being done onto boards as it is something that's happened, you're recognising it. Whereas trusts are accountable to the Secretary of State for their funding. It's the local authority who's accountable to the Secretary of State for the performance of schools' budgets. So it's in their interest to support schools as much as possible, isn't it?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I have to say, hands on heart, all of the local authorities I've worked with in this job and previous ones are there to help. And I would say, I would hope that you're not just working with the finance team at the local authority, but also your school improvement partners and your governance lead or whoever that might be. But the team together can really support you.
Thanks very much. That is really helpful. Had some common theme questions about the risk register, actually, and governors asking, are there any templates they can use? Whose responsibility is it to create it? Is it a school one? Is it something that governors have to give to the school leaders? How does it all work?
Great. Okay. So I think, as I said, it is a mandatory requirement for a trust and the trust board to monitor risk. And actually, I think the last but one iteration of the governance handbook it also said for maintained schools that looking at risk is a key aspect of good governance. So in its easiest way for me to answer this question, yes, there are lots of examples out there of really good risk management. And all of the maintained schools that I have implemented risk registers for, actually, it's not something that everybody's like, oh, I didn't know that was a risk, or I've never heard of that before. It's actually about the management of it. So it's bringing it all together in an overarching document where you look at strategic risk, you look at operational risk, you look at compliance, you look at financials, and all of those things you'll find are very much interlinked. So really good risk registers will have a little code. So you'll look at likelihood versus impact. So whilst impact might be really high, the likelihood of it happening is very low. That will be RAG rated as part of that sort of calculation, if you like. And as I said, you can't remove it altogether. Some you have to live with. It's the responsibility, and this is not helpful, I know, the responsibility of you all to produce that risk register. And I would say that your leadership team would need to start the process and own it. But there may well be aspects of that risk register that your governing board will own as well. So you may well have risks around governance, for instance. So it might be chair, vice chair, clerk, etc., can take ownership for some of that. We've got some really good examples of risk registers. I'm sure Governors for Schools has as well. There are lots of things that you can literally just Google it, and you'll get a really good idea if you compare and contrast lots of examples, what works for your school. It does not have to be 15 pages long in tiny size 8 writing. It can be on a page, but it's looking, as I said about the budget, looking at your school holistically.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And it's worth saying as well, isn't it, Charlotte, that it doesn't stay stagnant, and actually your risks change over time. So one template does not fit all.
Absolutely.
So making it sort of present and relevant is the key to this.
Absolutely. And as you said, constant monitoring, absolutely. That's the key to it, isn't it? Don't do it and look at it once a year. Then let's not waste anybody's time. Look at it, monitor it, review it, talk about it.
Perfect. Moving on to that, I mean, I think that there is a little bit of a normal conversation that happens amongst governors about, okay, so what's operational and what's strategic, and what do I roll my sleeves up and do, and as a governor, what do I step back and question? So there's a little bit on the risk register, and I think that was really helpful how you explained the SLT can create it, set it up, but you bring it to governors and co-collaborate. When it comes to applying for grants and so on and so forth, what's the role, like the actual physical doing of it, like the roll the sleeves up from a governor's perspective?
Okay, great. So good question. Our biggest question about governance across the sector is that split between operational and strategic, and it is very difficult. You know, our role as governors, if you think in its basic sense, is see, not do. So you are making sure that you have got that line between overseeing and doing, and you're sort of looking over the fence, aren't you, into what's happening to make sure it's happening, but you're not on that side of the fence doing. So with the grants, for instance, your role as governors would be, let's get it on an agenda. Let's talk about it. Let's question whether there's anything there that we could look at. Do we have the capacity to look at it in the first place? If not, what can we do to support you? So that isn't necessarily about you completing that work, although saying that, if you want to go on that website and have a look yourself, that might be helpful to flesh out that agenda, you know, and to flesh out that conversation. But it is for the school to do. It is for you to see and advise and monitor.
That's so clear. Thank you. And just cascading this to the next question as well, in terms of the role of the governors on standard and regular financial forecasting and monitoring process for schools. Should it be monthly? Should it be quarterly? What depth should it be in? Should governors just expect to see an output ahead of committees, or is there a different way that governors should be involved?
In the sort of minutiae of the budget setting, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, the forecasting and planning on a monthly basis.
So first of all, there are some regulations about how often you as governors receive financial information, and you should be getting it on a half-termly basis, so 6 times a year. And although on the trust sector, although this is just changing, your financial and management account should be sent monthly. Okay, that is changing slightly, and I think the rule's changing to the chair receiving it rather than all trustees. But from a local authority perspective, you should be receiving a financial update from your school 6 times a year. So that will, first of all, give you a really good opportunity to not just look at it 3 times a year when you meet your finance committee or whenever it is that you table it at FGB, but you are looking at it regularly. I think the key to it is understanding it. So your questions and analysis are relevant rather than when you're receiving it, really. So as I said, are you getting the information in the way that you can read it? Have you been trained on understanding those income and expenditure nominal codes? What does it mean? Are you presented with information that perhaps shows the percentage of spend against the year to date? So I know when I look at my accounts, I think, oh my God, we're only halfway through the year and there's 99% spend against that budget code. Well, actually, the context around there is that it was an SLA that needed paying at the beginning of the year. But for all the other spends that happen more regularly over the year, if we're looking at it at the end of term 1, are we seeing sort of 33% or whatever it is spend against budget codes? So I think however many times you look at it, the key to it is understanding what you're looking at, and don't be afraid to ask. I don't know whether that's answered that question.
Thank you. Charlotte, that's really helpful. And if anybody would like to put a follow-up question, please do, and I'll keep monitoring on that. So setting a budget in challenging times, theme of today. And quite rightly, someone's asked a question around, okay, so what's in our gift of control, and what sort of level of financial delegation do are governors delegating down to head teachers at the moment? And are there some, is there a guidance or a recommended amount, for instance, 5k, 10k for head
For your
teachers to be able
delegated
to...
spend?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, all right. So if I go back to my LA days, which were sort of 5+ years ago, the general rule of thumb was 5 grand. However, I think it depends on the size of your school. It depends on the size of your budget, and what was 5 grand 5 years ago ain't 5 grand these days, is it? When I look at what turns up in my shopping for 100 quid, it's very different. So I think you need to look at your overall income and expenditure. Look at a percentage of that. Look at, actually not percentage, but look at what you spend your money on. How much is planned and how much is incidental. You might want to compare to previous years and look at perhaps the sort of average amount, the type of things that you're asking your head teacher to sign off. So I know that for our head teacher at our really large secondary school, our delegated spends 10 grand. So I know that the primary school that I used to work at, that's a huge amount of money for them, and that would be 5 grand. So I think a little bit of context around the size of your setting, but that's in my personal experience what I've done.
That's really helpful to get that snapshot. And just a follow-on question in terms of procurement overall, when it comes to sort of like the whole life term of a contract, how does that impact on delegated authority of spend?
So this is where I would make sure that there are some really strong checks and balances in. So if the delegated spend for the contract is within your agreed amount, great. But let's say if it's 10 grand, and actually that 10 grand is for a piece of work or service over a year rather than a thing that you're buying that's being delivered. You should really make sure that that's built into your financial monitoring. So is this effective? Actually, you should be involved in looking at the procurement of some things, and your head teacher may well come to you and say, this is sort of borderline of what we're talking about with delegated spend, but actually, can we talk about, do we pay it all up front? Do we split it over some costs? How do we make sure that this money is being well spent? Is it going to help our children at the end of the day? That's the bit that we need to remember, isn't it, in all our decision making?
That's great. I'm just going to, I think we have time for one last question, and I'm going to ask it on behalf of Joanne. What advice do you have on carrying forward restricted funds from grant fundraising in a maintained school? And that's really thinking about LA clawback at the end of the year and carrying forward restricted funds as a surplus. And is there any advice you can give on that?
Okay, so this very much depends on what type of restricted funds we're talking about, because there are some rules around what needs spending in year. And you will need to go to your local authority and look at your budget income and that type of funding to see where what's restricted and what's not. And when I say restricted, what I mean is, have we got to spend it on this cohort of children? And actually, if that's the case, you should be spending it on those children so they benefit from it. There are some streams that can be carried forward, and where that's sensible, absolutely, I would encourage you to do that. Please be wary of that, as you said, that sort of surplus that you'll have to report to your local authority. We had some very difficult conversations and let's say heated discussions from schools saying, no, we need this money, we need to keep it because we've got a plan for it. And actually some schools that just hadn't spent it. And I think that's a real difference. So if you're carrying funds forward for a reason, and not just because it looks good on our bottom line, but we are going to spend this on something that will benefit all of our children in the future, then that is a case you can make to your local authority for carrying forward a surplus. If it's a case of we haven't got around to spending it, well, that is not fair on those children. You know, they should absolutely benefit from the money that is given to you for them, not for generations to come. But there is context around all of that. And if you have that case, you should be able to make it.
That's brilliant. And I can see that question being asked across the country. So many boards must be having that if there are things that you're looking to save towards. Charlotte, that has been incredible. An absolute
Thank you
breadth
so
of
much.
range of questions that you've just managed so beautifully. Apologies to those who didn't quite manage to get through, tried to choose questions that might have applied to a number of different settings and contexts there. Thank you so much, everybody, for your engagement and spending the hour with us.